Cowboy took an Apache woman as payment, then learned she was the chief's only heir. Jacob Carter had been riding for hours under the hot desert sun. The land around him was dry, wide, and quiet, broken only by small bushes and distant hills. His horse moved slowly, tired from the long journey, just like Jacob himself. He was not a rich man. He owned a small ranch that barely survived from season to season. One bad deal could mean losing everything, and sadly, that was exactly what had happened to him. A few weeks earlier, Jacob had trusted a trader named Miller to help him sell some cattle. Miller had promised a fair price and quick payment. Jacob had shaken his hand and believed him, but when the time came to collect the money, Miller kept making excuses. First he said the buyers were late, then he said the money would come next week. Finally, Jacob rode into the small desert trading post to face him in person. The trading post was a dusty wooden building with a few horses tied outside. Inside, the air smelled of leather, sweat, and old wood. A few men sat quietly, drinking and talking in low voices. When Jacob walked in, the room became quieter. People in places like this often knew each other's troubles without being told. Jacob found Miller behind the counter. The man looked nervous. His eyes shifted, and his hands moved restlessly as if he did not know what to do with them. "Jacob," Miller said, forcing a weak smile. "Good to see you." Jacob did not smile back. "I came for what you owe me," he said calmly, but firmly. "I can't wait any longer." Miller swallowed. He looked around as if hoping someone else would save him from this moment. "I don't have the cash right now," he said. "Things went bad, worse than I thought." Jacob felt anger rise in his chest, but he tried to control it.
"You made a promise," he said. "That money keeps my ranch alive."
"Without it, I lose everything." Miller leaned closer and lowered his voice. I know. That's why I have another way to settle this." Jacob frowned. "Another way? I don't want stories. I want what I'm owed." Miller hesitated, then nodded toward a back room. "Come with me." Jacob followed, confused and uneasy. In the back, sitting quietly on a wooden bench, was a young Apache woman. Her hands rested in her lap. Her face was calm, but her eyes were alert and guarded. She looked tired, yet strong. She did not look like someone who belonged to this place. "What is this?" he asked. Miller cleared his throat. "She was brought here during a tribal dispute," he said quietly. I thought I could use her to pay off what I owe you." Jacob felt shocked and uncomfortable. "You can't be serious," he said. "She's a person, not money." Miller looked desperate. "I have nothing else, Jacob. No cash, no cattle, no land. If you don't take this, I'm ruined. You know how things are out here. People make deals the only way they can." Jacob stood in silence. His mind raced. He did not like what he was hearing, and he did not like what was being offered. But he also thought of his ranch, his land, and the years of hard work he had put into it. If he walked away with nothing, he might lose his home. He felt trapped between doing what felt right and doing what felt necessary to survive. He looked at the woman again. She met his eyes for a brief moment. There was no begging in her look, no fear on the surface, just a steady, quiet strength that made Jacob feel even worse about the situation. "I don't want trouble," Jacob said slowly. "I just want what I'm owed. This is all I have," Miller said. "Please." Jacob took a deep breath. His heart felt heavy. He knew this choice would stay with him for a long time, no matter what he decided. Finally, he nodded once, not because he felt good about it, but because he felt he had no other way to protect his future. "I'll take responsibility for her safety," Jacob said, "but this isn't right. You know that." Miller nodded quickly. I know. But at least you're a decent man. She'll be better off with you than here." Jacob was not sure that was true, but he did not argue. He turned to the woman and spoke slowly, hoping his tone would show respect. "You'll come with me," he said gently. "I won't hurt you." She stood up quietly, picked up a small bundle that seemed to be all she owned, and followed him. Her movements were calm and proud, even in a situation that was clearly unfair. Outside, Jacob helped her onto a horse. The sun was starting to lower, painting the sky with soft orange and red colors. The moment felt heavy and strange. Jacob mounted his own horse, and they began to ride away from the trading post. The journey was quiet. The only sounds were the horse's hooves and the wind moving through the dry land. Jacob tried to think of what to say, but the right words never came. He did not know her name. He did not know her story. All he knew was that she had been taken far from her people and now rode with a man she did not know. As the miles passed, Jacob noticed small details about her. The way she sat straight in the saddle, even when tired. The way she watched the land as if she knew how to read it. She did not look like someone who was lost in the world. She looked like someone who belonged somewhere important. They stopped for water near a small creek. Jacob offered her some food. She accepted with a quiet nod. There was no anger in her actions, but there was distance. A wall that told Jacob she did not trust him, and he could not blame her. That night, they made a small camp. Jacob built a fire and kept his distance to give her space. As the flames flickered, he stared into the fire and thought about what he had done. He told himself it was just a temporary situation. He told himself he would find a better solution later. But deep down, he knew that taking her had already changed something inside him. He felt uneasy. He had always believed himself to be an honest man. Not perfect, but fair. Now, he wondered if he had crossed a line he could never fully forget. He thought about how this woman must feel, taken from her people, carried into an uncertain future, surrounded by strangers and strange lands. As the fire burned low, Jacob made a silent promise to himself. No matter how this situation had started, he would treat her with respect. He would not see her as a debt or a bargain. He would see her as a human being who deserved dignity. Still, he did not yet understand how serious the situation truly was. Alaba. He did not know that her absence would cause fear and anger among her people. He did not know that powerful eyes would soon be searching for her. To Jacob, this was only about survival and a hard choice in a hard land. That this first decision, made in a dusty trading post on a hot desert day, was only the beginning. It would lead him down a path he never expected, one that would test his courage, his values, and the kind of man he truly wanted to be. Jacob and the Apache woman continued their journey the next morning before the sun fully rose. The desert air was cool, and a soft wind moved across the open land. The sky slowly changed from dark blue to light pink, and then to gold. Jacob liked riding early. It gave him time to think, and kept him away from the worst heat of the day. But this morning his thoughts were heavier than usual. The woman rode a short distance behind him. She kept her eyes on the land and on Jacob, watching his movements carefully. Jacob could feel her presence, even when she said nothing. The silence between them felt thick, full of things that could not be said with words. Jacob wanted to speak, to explain, to say something that might make her feel less afraid, but he did not know what to say. He did not know her language well, and she did not seem eager to talk. Every time he opened his mouth, the words felt wrong, so he closed it again. They rode for hours, stopping only to give the horses water and rest. During one stop, Jacob noticed that the woman moved carefully, as if she was used to long travel. She checked the horse's saddle without being asked, and helped tighten a loose strap. Her actions showed experience, not weakness. Jacob realized she was not someone who had lived a soft life. She was strong in ways that did not need to be spoken. At midday, the sun became hot and bright. The land seemed endless. Jacob found a small area with some shade and decided to rest. He offered her food again. She accepted, quietly. They sat a short distance apart, chewing slowly. The only sounds were insects and the wind. Jacob finally tried to speak. "My name is Jacob," he said, pointing to himself. He then gently pointed to her, hoping she would understand. She looked at him for a moment, studying his face. After a pause, she said a name in her own language. Jacob did not understand it clearly, but he nodded. He did not try to repeat it, afraid he would say it wrong. Still, this small exchange felt important. It was the first tiny bridge between two strangers forced together by unfair choices. As they continued riding, Jacob began to notice her eyes more. They were always alert, always watching. She looked at the hills, the rocks, the sky, as if reading signs that Jacob could not see. Once, she raised her hand slightly, and Jacob stopped. Moments later, a small group of wild animals crossed their path. Jacob realized she had heard or sensed them before he had. This made him respect her even more. That evening, they camped near a low group of rocks that gave some protection from the wind. Jacob built a fire again. He gave her space, sitting on the other side. As the sky grew dark, stars filled the night. The desert sky was wide and beautiful, but also lonely. While Jacob worked on the fire, he heard a soft sound. The woman was quietly singing or humming a low song. The melody was gentle and sad, yet also strong. Jacob did not understand the words, but he felt the emotion in the sound. It made him think of home, family, and people waiting somewhere far away. He sat still and listened. He did not want to interrupt. The song made him feel a tightness in his chest. He imagined that she was singing about her people, her land, and the life she had been pulled away from. For the first time, Jacob truly felt the weight of what had happened to her. That night, Jacob had trouble sleeping. He stared at the stars and thought about his choices. He told himself again that he had done what he had to do, but the woman's song stayed in his mind. It made his reasons feel smaller, and her loss feel much bigger. The next few days followed a similar pattern. Long hours of riding, short stops for water and food, quiet nights by the fire. The woman remained mostly silent, but small changes began to appear. She no longer looked at Jacob with only fear and distance. Sometimes when he offered water or food, she gave a small nod that felt more like thanks than simple acceptance. Once, when Jacob's horse stepped on a sharp rock and limped slightly, the woman moved quickly to help. She pointed at the hoof and showed him how to check it. Her actions were calm and skilled. Together they removed the small stone and made sure the horse was okay. Jacob realized then that she did not see him only as someone who had taken her. She also saw him as someone traveling with her, sharing the same dangers of the land. This shared moment changed something between them. The silence became less heavy. It was still quiet, but now it felt more like two people choosing not to speak, rather than two strangers trapped together. One evening, a strong wind came through their camp. The fire kept going out, and the air was cold. Without speaking, the woman moved closer to the fire and used rocks to block the wind. Jacob watched her work, and then helped. Their hands almost touched as they placed the stones. For a second they both paused. Then they continued, pretending it had not happened. But Jacob felt it. A small sign of trust. A small sign of shared effort. Jacob began to think about her as more than a problem or a responsibility. He started to think about her as a person with her own strength, her own past, and her own future. He wondered what her life had been like before this. Did she have family? Did she have people who loved her and were waiting for her? The thought made him uncomfortable because he knew the answer was likely yes. Sometimes Jacob tried to imagine what he would feel if someone took a person he cared about and rode away into the desert. The idea made his chest feel tight. He understood then more clearly that this situation was not just hard for him. It was far harder for her. One afternoon, they passed near a small stream. The woman stopped and knelt to touch the water. She closed her eyes for a moment, as if saying a silent prayer or remembering something. Jacob stood back and gave her privacy. He did not know what the moment meant, but he felt it was important to her. Slowly, Jacob's thoughts began to change. At first he had told himself this was only about his ranch and survival. Now, he started to feel that there was something bigger at stake. There was right and wrong. There was the weight of another person's life and freedom. He still did not know her full story. He still did not know how important she truly was. But deep inside, he began to understand that she was not just someone caught in trouble. She was someone who belonged to a world that was now searching for her, even if he did not yet see it. By the end of part 2, Jacob was no longer riding with only fear and need in his heart. He was riding with questions, with growing respect, and with a quiet feeling that this journey was leading him toward a truth he was not yet ready to face. If you want, I can now expand part 3 in the same simple, engaging style and length. Jacob and the woman reached a small settlement after many days of travel. It was not a large town, just a few buildings, a water well, and a place where travelers sometimes stopped to rest, trade, or get news. Dust covered everything. Horses stood tied to wooden posts, and a few people moved slowly in the heat. Jacob felt nervous as they rode in. Something in the air felt different. He could not explain it, but he felt like eyes were watching him more closely than usual. Her back was straight, and her eyes moved carefully from one place to another. Jacob decided they needed supplies. He tied the horses and told the woman to stay close. He did not want to leave her alone in an unfamiliar place. As they walked, people looked at them with quiet curiosity. Some looks were normal for strangers, but some felt heavier, as if people recognized something that Jacob did not. Inside a small general store, Jacob asked for water, food, and some simple supplies. The store owner, an older man with tired eyes, studied Jacob and then looked at the woman. His face changed slightly. Not fear, not anger, but something closer to concern. "You traveling far?" the man asked. "Just passing through," Jacob replied. "Headed back toward my ranch." The man nodded slowly, but his eyes returned to the woman. He seemed to hesitate, as if deciding whether to say something. Finally, he leaned in closer and spoke in a lower voice. "You should be careful," he said quietly. Jacob frowned. "Careful about what?" The man looked around to make sure no one else was listening. "About who you're traveling with." Jacob felt a cold feeling move through his chest. "What do you mean?" The man took a breath. "That woman. She's not just anyone. Word's been spreading. Jacob's heart started to beat faster. Spreading about what? The man lowered his voice even more. She's Apache. Not only that, but people say she's important. Very important. Jacob felt his hands tighten. Important how? The man paused. They say she's the only daughter of a powerful chief. Some even say she's his chosen heir. Her people are searching. Hard. Jacob felt like the ground shifted under his feet. For a moment, he could not speak. He looked back at the woman who stood quietly near the door, unaware of the exact words being spoken but clearly sensing tension. "The chief's only heir?" Jacob whispered. The man nodded. "That's what folks are saying. Search parties, scouts, people moving fast. If they find out you're with her, things could get dangerous."
For you, for everyone.
Jacob stepped back slightly, his mind racing. He had known she was important in some way. He had seen her strength, her dignity, her calm. But this was far bigger than he had imagined. He had not taken just any woman from a trader. He had taken someone whose absence could shake an entire community. He paid for the supplies quickly, thanked the man, and left the store. Outside, the sun felt brighter, harsher. The woman looked at him, sensing something had changed. Jacob tried to keep his face calm, but inside, fear and guilt mixed together. They walked away from the center of the settlement to a quieter area near their horses. Jacob sat down on a low wooden step and held his head in his hands for a moment. He did not want to scare her, but he also did not know how to hide what he had just learned. He looked up at her and tried to speak slowly and gently. "People are looking for you," he said. He pointed toward the land, then back to her, hoping she would understand. "Your people." Her eyes widened slightly. She stiffened, then looked away for a moment, as if thinking. She said a few words in her language, her voice low and serious. Jacob did not understand the words, but he understood the emotion. She was worried, not just for herself, but for what her absence meant. Jacob now saw everything differently. Every mile they had traveled, every night by the fire, every quiet moment, all of it had been under a shadow he did not even know existed. He imagined her people, her father, her family, her community, wondering where she was. Searching the land, fearing the worst, the thought made his chest feel heavy. He realized that his personal trouble, his ranch, his money problems, all felt small compared to what he had walked into. That night, they camped outside the settlement, away from curious eyes. Jacob could not sleep. The fire crackled softly, but his mind was loud. He kept replaying the trader's words, the store owner's warning, and the look in the woman's eyes. He thought about running, about taking a different route, about hiding somewhere remote. But each idea felt wrong. The more he thought about it, the more he understood that keeping her with him would only make things worse. Not just for him, but for her and her people. The woman sat across from him, staring into the fire. Her face was calm, but there was sadness there too. Jacob wondered if she knew how serious the situation truly was. Maybe she did. Maybe she had always known. Maybe she had been waiting for the moment when the truth would finally come out. Jacob felt small. He had walked into this thinking he was making a hard but simple choice. Now he saw that it was not simple at all. It was part of something much bigger than him. The next morning, as they prepared to leave, Jacob noticed signs that made him more nervous. Press tracks near the settlement, people whispering when they thought he was not listening, a feeling that time was running out. At one point, a man rode past them slowly, looking carefully at the woman. His eyes stayed on her longer than felt normal. Jacob felt his stomach twist. She realized that if strangers could recognize her importance, then her own people would not be far behind. They rode away from the settlement, but the land now felt different. Every hill, every group of trees, every bend in the trail felt like a place where someone could be watching. Jacob finally accepted something he had been trying to avoid. He was not just responsible for himself anymore. His choices now affected someone whose life carried weight for many others. He felt the pressure of that responsibility in every breath. That afternoon they stopped near a rocky area for water. Jacob sat down and looked at the woman. He spoke slowly, choosing his words carefully.
I didn't know, he said. I didn't know who you were.
I didn't know how important you are. She watched him closely. He placed his hand on his chest, then gestured outward, trying to show honesty. I don't want to cause harm. She studied his face for a long moment. Then she gave a small nod. It was not full trust, but it was something. It felt like she understood that he was finally beginning to see the truth. Jacob now knew one thing for sure. This journey was no longer just about getting back to his ranch. It was about facing the consequences of his actions. It was about deciding what kind of man he truly was. Fear still followed him, but now, so did a growing sense of duty. He had unknowingly stepped into the path of powerful forces. The search for the chief's only heir was real, and sooner or later, that search would cross directly with him. Part 3 ends with Jacob fully understanding the seriousness of the situation, standing at the edge of a decision that would change everything that came next. Whenever you're ready, I can expand Part 4 in the same simple, long, and engaging style. Jacob rode with heavy thoughts after leaving the small settlement. The land looked the same as before, dry, wide, and quiet. But inside him, everything felt different. Every sound made him turn his head. Every shadow on the ground made him wonder if someone was following them. The truth he had learned stayed with him like a weight on his chest. The woman rode beside him now, not behind. It was a small change, but it felt important. It was as if, without words, they both understood that things had entered a new stage. This was no longer just a journey of survival. It was a journey of choice. Jacob kept thinking about what the store owner had said. Search parties, scouts, people moving across the land looking for her. He imagined riders spreading out in different directions, calling her name, asking questions, following any sign. The idea made him feel both afraid and ashamed. He finally accepted something he had been trying to avoid. Keeping her with him was wrong. Even if he had taken her because he felt trapped, that did not make it right. He could see that clearly now. The longer he held on to her, the more danger he brought to both of them. One evening, as the sun began to set, Jacob stopped near a small group of trees. He tied the horses and built a small fire. The air was cooler and the sky slowly turned orange and purple. The woman sat on a rock, watching the fire quietly. Jacob sat across from her. He looked at the flames for a long time, gathering courage. Then he spoke, slowly and carefully. "I'm going to help you go back," he said. She looked up at him quickly. Her eyes searched his face, trying to understand his meaning. He pointed back in the direction they had come from, then pointed outward toward the distant land.
Your people, he said. I will take you to them. For a moment, she did not move.
Then her face changed, not with joy, not with anger, but with something deeper. Relief mixed with caution. She had likely heard promises before, promises that meant nothing. Jacob understood that. He placed his hand on his chest again. "I mean it," he said softly. "I made a mistake. I want to fix it." She stayed quiet, but her posture softened slightly. She nodded once, slowly. It was not full trust, but it was enough to show she had heard him. That night, Jacob felt a strange mix of fear and peace. Fear because he knew turning back toward her people could be dangerous. Peace because for the first time since the trading post, he felt he was choosing the right path. The next morning, they changed direction. The land they traveled through became rougher. Hills rose and fell. Rocks covered the ground. The paths were not always clear. Jacob knew this area was closer to Apache territory. That made him nervous, but he kept going. He watched the woman more closely now. She seemed more focused, more alert. At times, she pointed toward certain paths or shook her head at others. Jacob began to trust her instincts. She knew this land better than he ever could. Once, they heard distant hoofbeats. Both of them froze. Jacob reached for his horse's reins and stayed still. The sound passed far away, but it reminded him how close they might be to being seen. Jacob did not want trouble. He did not want anyone to think he was trying to hide her. His goal was simple, even if the road was not. Get her home safely. That was all that mattered now. One afternoon, they came across an old trail. The woman stopped and studied it carefully. She touched the ground, then looked toward the hills. She said a few quiet words in her language. Jacob did not understand them, but he understood her meaning. This path was important. They followed the trail. As they rode, Jacob thought about what might happen when they finally met her people. Would they believe him? Would they see him as a threat? Would they be angry? He could not blame them if they were. He imagined a father who had lost his daughter, a leader who had lost his only heir. The thought made Jacob's stomach twist. He knew that words alone might not be enough to explain his actions. At night, the woman began to speak a little more. Not full conversations, but small sounds, short words, gestures. She pointed to certain stars. She pointed to the land. Jacob felt like she was sharing pieces of her world with him, even if he could not fully understand them. One night, she pointed to herself, and then made a motion that showed leadership. Jacob frowned slightly, trying to understand. Then he realized what she might be trying to say. That she had a role, a responsibility, a place of importance. Jacob felt his throat tighten. It made everything more real. As they traveled, the land began to show signs of others. Old camp areas, marks on trees, faint tracks. The woman noticed these things quickly. Her body became more tense, but also more hopeful. "They're close," Jacob said quietly, even though he did not know if she understood the words. He could feel it too. One evening they saw smoke far in the distance, thin and gray, rising into the sky. The woman stopped her horse and stared at it. Her breathing changed. She placed a hand over her heart. Jacob followed her gaze.
"Your people," he said softly. She nodded, her eyes shining with strong emotion.
It was the first time Jacob saw something close to hope clearly on her face. But hope came with fear. Jacob knew that when they met, he would be judged. Not by lawmen, not by traitors, but by people whose lives he had touched in a way he never meant to. As they got closer, Jacob slowed his horse. He raised his hand slightly, practicing what he might do when they met others. He wanted to show he came in peace. He wanted to show respect. The woman rode ahead a little, then looked back at him. For a moment, their eyes met. In that look, Jacob saw many things: fear, strength, gratitude, and a question. Would he truly stand by his choice? Jacob nodded to her, steady and sure. He would. They moved forward slowly. Suddenly, figures appeared on a ridge. Riders, watching, silent. The woman straightened in her saddle. She lifted her head high. Jacob's heart began to pound. He stopped his horse and did not move. He placed his hands where they could be seen. He did not want to make any sudden moves. He did not want to cause fear. The riders did not rush. They observed. They spoke to each other in low voices. One of them rode ahead slightly, stopping at a distance. The woman called out in her language. Her voice was strong and clear. It carried across the open land. Jacob did not understand the words, but he felt their power. There was a pause. Then the rider answered. More voices joined in. More movement on the ridge. The woman's shoulders relaxed slightly. She looked back at Jacob. Her eyes filled with emotion. They know, Jacob whispered to himself. They know you're here. This was the moment everything led to. Jacob felt fear, yes, but he also felt something else, a strange sense of calm. He had made his choice. He had chosen to do what he believed was right, even if it was dangerous. As the riders began to move closer, Jacob stayed still. He did not reach for anything. He did not run. He did not hide. He waited. Part 4 ends with Jacob standing on the edge of meeting her people, having chosen honor over fear, ready to face whatever came next, because he finally understood that some choices matter more than comfort, money, or safety. Whenever you're ready, I can now expand Part 5 in the same long, simple, and engaging style to complete. Jacob sat tall on his horse as the riders moved closer. His heart beat hard in his chest, but he forced himself to stay calm. He knew this moment would decide everything. The woman rode a little ahead of him. Her posture was strong, her head held high, like someone who belonged there. Jacob realized that for the first time since they met, she truly looked like she was home, even before reaching her people. The riders approached slowly and carefully. They did not rush. They did not shout. Their faces were serious, full of focus and emotion. One older man rode forward. He carried himself with great presence. Even without words, Jacob could tell this man was a leader. The woman spoke first. Her voice was steady but filled with deep feeling. She spoke in her language, pointing back toward Jacob, then toward herself, then toward the land. Jacob could not understand the words, but he could understand the meaning. She was telling her story. She was explaining how she had been taken and how she had been brought back. The older man listened closely. His eyes moved between his daughter and Jacob. His face showed pain, relief, and strength. All at once, the air felt heavy with emotion. Jacob slowly raised one hand in a peaceful gesture. He did not speak loudly. He did not make sudden movements. He waited for the right moment, then spoke calmly. I didn't know who she was, Jacob said. I made a mistake, but I brought her back. I wanted to make things right. He did not know if the leader understood all his words, but he hoped his tone and body language would speak for him. The woman turned to the older man and spoke again, this time more firmly. She looked at Jacob, then back at her father. Her voice carried strength. She was not only a daughter in this moment. She was a woman who understood responsibility and choice. There was a long pause. The riders around them stayed still. The wind moved across the land. Dust shifted lightly at their feet. Jacob felt like time itself had slowed. Then the older man spoke. His voice was deep and calm. He said a few strong words in his language. The other riders listened closely. Some nodded. Some looked at Jacob with careful eyes. The woman's shoulders relaxed. She let out a slow breath she had been holding for a long time. Jacob could feel that the danger was not gone, but it had changed. This was no longer a moment of anger. It was a moment of judgment. The older man rode closer to Jacob. He stopped, only a short distance away. Their eyes met. Jacob did not look away. He wanted the man to see that he was not hiding anything. The leader studied Jacob carefully. He looked at his clothes, his tired face, his worn hands. He looked like a man who had worked hard and carried many burdens, not a man of great power, just a man who had made a hard choice. The woman spoke again, more softly this time. She pointed to Jacob and then to herself, making a small gesture that showed protection and return. It was clear. She was saying that Jacob had chosen to bring her back when he could have done otherwise. The older man closed his eyes for a brief moment. When he opened them, something had changed. The anger that might have been there was no longer strong. In its place was a quiet understanding. He spoke again, slowly. One of the other riders, who seemed to understand both worlds, stepped forward slightly and spoke to Jacob in simple words. "He says you did not take her to harm her," the man explained. "He says you chose to return her. That matters." Jacob swallowed. "I never wanted to cause pain," he said. "I only want to leave things better than I found them." The man translated. The older leader listened. There was another long pause. Then the older man nodded. It was not a big movement, not dramatic, but it meant everything. The tension in the air slowly faded. The riders relaxed slightly. Some looked away, no longer watching Jacob so closely. The woman's eyes filled with emotion. She looked at her father, then at Jacob. For a moment, Jacob thought he might be asked to stay, or questioned further, or punished. But instead, the leader spoke again. Calmly, the translator turned to Jacob. "He says you may go."
You brought her home. That is enough.
Jacob felt a wave of relief move through him. His shoulders lowered. He had not realized how tense he had been until that moment. The woman rode closer to Jacob. She looked at him for a long moment. Her eyes showed gratitude, respect, and something like sadness. Their journey together was ending. She spoke softly to him in her language. Jacob did not understand the words, but he understood the feeling. It was a goodbye, a thank you, a closing of a hard chapter. Jacob nodded to her. "I'm glad you're home," he said quietly. She gave a small, respectful nod in return. The older leader raised his hand slightly. It was not a threat. It was a sign of closure. Jacob understood. This was the end of his part in their story. Jacob turned his horse slowly. He did not rush away. He did not look back too many times. He wanted to show respect by leaving calmly and with dignity. As he rode away, the land felt different, lighter. The same desert, the same wind, the same sky. But inside Jacob, something had changed forever. He thought about how close he had come to making a much worse choice. How easy it would have been to think only about himself. How different his life might have been if he had not listened to his conscience. He knew he would return to his ranch. He knew his problems would still be there. Money would still be tight. Work would still be hard. Life would still be full of struggle. But he also knew that he would never forget this journey. He had learned that survival is important. But honor is more important. That money can be lost and gained again, but respect and dignity cannot be replaced once they are broken. He had learned that people are not bargains.
They are not payments. They are lives, families, futures.
As the sun lowered in the sky, Jacob rode on. The road ahead was long, but his heart felt clearer. He did not know what the future held, but he knew he would face it as a better man than before. Far behind him, a daughter had returned to her people. A leader had his heir back. A community had been made whole again. And Jacob carried with him a lesson that would guide him for the rest of his life. Not all debts are paid with money. Some are paid with courage, some with honesty, and some with the simple but powerful choice to do what is right, even when it is hard. This was the end of one journey.